You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1010. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so glad that you are hanging out with us today. I was just actually on a call with some consulting clients, and we were working together through different things they were working on. And it was interesting. We were talking about not being motivated, not being as inspired. And I wrote down just kind of a little framework as I was thinking through this. I just wanted to give you a little behind the scenes as you think about staying inspired in your practice. And I wrote down the question, is this ignorance? Is this procrastination, or is it unimportant? And so thinking about when we're not inspired in our private practices, is this ignorance? Do we just not know what to do? Like, we've leveled up so much that we just don't even know the next steps. Well, then the step to take then is to learn something, to be around other people that are where you want to be. Is it procrastination? You should be doing it. You know it's good for your practice. You know that it's good for those next steps, but you don't really see the value in what the result is. I often see this with people when their plates are very full and they want to go do a podcast, they want to go do e-courses, they want to, grow into a group practice. But what they really need to do is they need to make their plate less full. They need to hire someone to mow their lawn. They need to hire someone to answer the phones better or do their billing. And that doesn't feel fun sometimes. But if we link that to the thing that is fun, the new podcast, the new exciting initiative, and say, in order for me to have the time and space to do that thing, well, I need to hire somebody. And that's not necessarily the fun part, but by doing that, I get to the fun part. So procrastination, that next step being, what's the result that this is going to give me? Or is it unimportant? Maybe you've outgrown things in your practice and really you don't need to hand it off to anyone. You don't need to have a technology do it. You need to just eliminate it from your to-do list. You need to say to yourself, I'm giving myself permission to no longer do this. I know for myself, I was a supervisor for LLPCs, so limited licensed professional counselors here in Michigan. And I realized at a certain point that working for 4.5 hours once a month, so we did like an evening once a month supervision, it just didn't work for me anymore. The money was good. The influence was good. The effect on the community was good. There weren't a whole lot of supervisors in the area at the time, but I had outgrown it. And it was time for me to just say, this is not important for me to put my time into. It was a big disappointment to those people because they had to go find new supervisors, but I had outgrown it. So asking yourself just that question of, is this ignorance, procrastination, or unimportant, is a great place to start in regards to when you're feeling like maybe you're not super inspired. And that is what we're talking about today, is staying inspired in your practice. And we have Dr. Victoria Grinman with us, who is a psychotherapist, a consultant, speaker, and transformation agent, often referred to as the secret weapon to couples and the parent whisperer, a person whom people can confide in and utilize as a resource and expert companion. She also holds certifications in aromatherapy and yoga and mindfulness, a longtime clinician volunteer with Experience Camps, an organization that provides children who have lost a loved one with a 1-week grief camp. Dr. Victoria is a Russian-speaking, and has done a ton of therapy and has done a ton of work in so many different spaces. Her bio is super long and in-depth, and I'm just pulling from different parts of it because she's an amazing person. And I just want you to meet her quicker than if I read through the entire thing. Victoria, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, I am really excited to have you here. You have lived a lot of life, and you have done so many things. Let's just start with the idea of inspiration, kind of the main focus of this episode. Outside of work, outside of business, in your life, um, like take us back a bit, like not right now, but like where are the seeds of wanting to live a life that is inspiring? Like where does that come from you, whether that's childhood or teen years or college? Like where are some of those early seeds of living a life that is inspired?
Thanks so much, Joe. What a great question. I think about just the way that my life started. I think like my nervous system is just used to a lot of dynamic things. My family and I were, we were refugee immigrants. We came here when I was very, very young. And so my life was just very, very fast paced. But what I'll say is, aside from all the inspiring things that have happened in my childhood, and I talk about this a little bit, my history in the performing arts. When I was very, very young, I was on a off Broadway stage, and I remember finishing. I was Lucille Ball, and I remember finishing a little stint with my partner at the time on stage. And I was very young; I was a kid, and I remember turning around, and there were so many people in the audience. And we couldn't see them because there were so many lights, flashing in our faces, which I wasn't prepared for. But we heard the standing ovation, and to me, it was like this. I was so inspired by their jubilance around what they just saw and heard and experienced. And I think that was my very first experience of influencing people with just being who I was being on stage. And I think that's why I was so into the performing arts when I was younger. It was just being who you're being and inspiring other people to be better, to be joyous, to have fun, to maybe even look within themselves, to do something creative. So that's just something that has always been a part of who I am.
I love that. Now, when were times in your life that you, for one reason or another, weren't inspired?
The times that I wasn't inspired in my life is when two things come up. One is when I was doing things the way that they were supposed to be done. And it's not that I don't follow rules. I have, a lot of respect for rules and regulations and societal rules and things like this. I'm very much an integrous person, but I'm not inspired by being in the box. And the other times I'm not haven't been inspired is when I, I I think about it like being a butterfly in a mason jar. Anytime I was in a situation, in a workplace situation, or a job has sort of run its course, and I've squeezed all the juice out of that lemon, so to speak. I would get this sense within me that like this is just not, getting up in the morning and doing it just no longer feels joyous. And those were the moments that I said I needed to change.
Mm. Well, so you focus a lot on people having an inspiring business, inspiring private practice. I want to start with there's a lot of folks listening to this podcast that are starting up a solo practice. They're bootstrapping it. They maybe have a full time job and it's a side gig for right now. What are things that people can do early on to make sure that they recognize what their heart for the private practice is, but then also set themselves up for future success so they're not undoing things later on?
Such a great question. I think that one of the biggest mistakes we make, and I've definitely done this myself, which is why I know we do it, is we go into action. We go into action right away, and we just kind of, put things together. We, kind of throw spaghetti at a wall to see if it sticks. We try things on, which is really great. But I think that gaining clarity, which really means doing nothing at first and waiting to make sure that whatever your actions are, they're aligned with you and what you truly, truly, truly desire and what you truly value. And so I think one of the first things that you can do if you're thinking about private practice, even if you're a student thinking that one day I want to be in private practice, you can start by asking yourself what people not are you good at working with, but who are you inspired to work with? I think those two things are very different. You can ask yourself, what are my values? Like, what do I want it to feel like? What do I want my life to feel like? When you start asking yourself questions that give you more clarity around what you actually want to feel and what you want it to look like, the clarity is what leads you to that aligned action. Otherwise, you're going to do a lot of things. You're going to put a website together, hire a marketer, hire people. You're going to do a lot of things that later on just don't feel aligned or like they evolve with you.
Mm. Now, for you in your own practice, what does that look like?
For me in my practice, it looks like working with the people that I love working with. It doesn't mean that I don't take on clients that are challenging, but it means that I have a very, very solid referral and connection to people who are able to support people that I don't. And it looks like taking on clients that I know I can support and that within the capacity that I have to support. It looks like creating my life and my private practice around it rather than the other way around, which is something I've done for a really long time. I would try to fit my life into my schedule versus the other way around. And it looks like constantly touching base with it. Like I see my private practice, and this is how I mentor, therapists and coaches as well, is to have a private practice that you're in relationship with. So we're constantly evolving with it. Like if you're in a relationship with someone very significant to you, hopefully you have conversations from time to time around like, are you happy? Are these things in our life going well? Are we still on the same page about these goals together? And the same thing should be done for you in your private practice. Because if you just set something up that works for you in the now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's sustainable and evolves with you.
Mm. Yeah. Now, what are some of the kind of pitfalls at different phases of practice that people run into in regards to just things they set up that get in the way of staying inspired? And then, yeah, let's start there. What are some of the pitfalls that tend to get in the way of having a practice that keeps people inspired?
Can you reframe the question?
Yeah, I mean, so there's lots of things that someone could do accidentally that become barriers. If we said inspiration is, something that we see as valuable to creating a sustainable private practice, and having this absolute love for your private practice. So there's probably things that inevitably get in the way of staying inspired. One example that I can think of is not outsourcing soon enough. The early phase private practice, a lot of times you're wearing multiple hats. You're the bookkeeper, you're the insurance biller, you're doing all that stuff. And, there's a certain point when you need to start outsourcing. Otherwise, you're getting sucked in these things that you're not an expert in. What are things like that get in the way as you grow and scale that get in the way of being inspired within your practice?
For sure. And I think that outsourcing is a big one and making sure that, like you said, that what you're doing is the thing that you are masterful in, and then having that network of people that love what they do that can support you. I think for me, it just goes to doing things out of fear versus doing things out of feeling inspired. So sometimes people will just, start a group. Like they'll just start a group, or they'll just take on clients and say yes at a rate that they have committed to not taking clients on, with, or they'll do things out of the fear that they have to do something. And so I think making commitments that don't necessarily feel good. I've had many, many people that I've worked with, and I myself have been in a position where I've taken on a project, like let's say starting a group, and was happy that people didn't sign up. And so, because I didn't really want to do it. And you want to put it out because you want something to go on your calendar, on your website, but it's not really aligned with what you're truly, hoping to do. So I think people rush and become impulsive when they feel that they have to fill their space. But it's really within a clear space where there's nothing, where you can create everything. So I think there's nothing wrong with a clean plate and gaining some clarity around what you really want. So I would say I think a pitfall would be to put something on your plate that you don't actually want to eat.
Mm. Something always comes up when you're running a private practice. Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your business. It's super easy to set up and get started. And if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all the data for you. It's no surprise 99% of businesses said the value they get for Gusto is worth the price. And here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today. Now, I think there's different phases to when maybe inspiration isn't the primary goal, but we want to keep that going. What are some times that either you or some of your clients have maybe moved away from inspiration and then realized, ooh, I want to come back to being inspired and practice more. I kind of let things creep in here. Like, what did that look like? Maybe some case studies either from yourself or some of your clients.
Sure. I mean, I have a big one for me, and this is really what led me to mentorship is, as you read in my bio, I had a couple of parents coin me as the parent whisperer. They were referring all of their friends to me. Here in my community, I work a lot with couples, and, I did really well with that for many, many years. I've been in the field for about, over 18 now. Um, but I think what ended up happening for me in my story was, about 2 or so years ago, I was really working so hard, creating a program that was going to reach many, many, many people. And it was based on many years of experience and lots of, testing and lots of group work and lots of, inspiration and love. And it was in the realm of supporting parents. I mean, it was what my research was in. And I'm just sharing all this because I was so married to it that I, really just only saw doing that thing, which is reaching parents so that they can support their children from an empowered place. And what ended up happening was I hired a wonderful marketer who became a friend of mine, who was helping me. And, he was giving me lots of work, every week, a blog, every, week I had to be on video, which was fine. But, it was a lot of work that I just didn't feel inspired by. But I did it anyway. I did it because I knew that I had a goal that, this program had to, I spent thousands upon thousands of dollars on programs that were going to help me create a webinar that was going to funnel, all of the things that we do to reach more people. And what ended up happening for me was one fine day, he and I, sat after my website was reiterated, 4 times by him and his team. And we had a heart to heart. And I said to him, I can't do this anymore. Like, I have this goal of supporting people, but something's not right. And he said to me, I think what you need to do is really think about, what would make you happy. And that question was just so hard for me because I wanted to be successful. So, what I had to do was really redefine what my idea of success was. And what I found was that my idea of success was ease and flow and sustainability. And through working with my own mentor, very quickly, after being asked the right questions, I found that in addition to being a psychotherapist in my community and a speaker, right, and a consultant, what I really, really love doing on the side, I would call it a side thing that was for fun, was supporting therapists in curating private practices that I had, ones that were value driven, that they loved. I have clients who tell me that now they can go on vacations with their families and not worry about an income or not worry about, how they're going to make it work. And that to me is, what makes me happy. So I think for me, it was hard to let go um, of the idea that I've worked so many years for this program to take off. And then the moment I realized that it wasn't actually, fulfilling my true, authentic idea of success, um, this part of my practice really took off. The, mentorship of therapists and coaches to really curate practices that work for them in their life. So that's part of my story and how I went from feeling really uninspired, and driven to feeling inspired and really, really happy now.
Mhm. What does that look like to kind of assess where you're at and then recalibrate? What do you see people do to identify what's not working and then make the changes that need to occur to enjoy their practice more?
I think it's it's a matter of slowing down, and taking your hands off of, the button that we keep pushing of like doing stuff. Um, for me, it's a matter of talking to people who I know can ask me the right questions, and gain clarity around where you're at right now and where it is that you want to be. Everything from how much you want to make, which is a question that I think is very vulnerable for a lot of people and feels very, uncomfortable to sit in, to asking yourself what you're making right now, to asking yourself, be unreasonable. If you were unreasonable, what would your life look like? Would you get up in the morning and spend time, doing your journal practice and spend time with your dog or your child or your partner, and then go out, off to the office? Or is it, working 3 days a week or 4 days a week? Like what feels most aligned for you, regardless of what you think is possible in your head, logically or reasonably, right? And I think it's doing that mindset work, that people don't necessarily want to do in the beginning because they just want to put the foot to the metal and just go. Um, so whenever people work with me, we take time to do what I call clarify. We take things off the plate. It's not about putting more things on. And we look at where you're at and where you want to go. We clear blind spots and we get clear on what's keeping you stuck. And I'll tell you, Joe, in those moments in the beginning, before we actually put anything into action, that's where all the magic happens. People tell me all the time, Victoria, is it because I'm talking to you now that these things are happening? Like, what's going on? And I always say, if there's like a Madonna concert in the summertime and you get a ticket now, you're already in the experience. You're
Mhm.
going. You're picking who you're going with and you're putting the outfit together and you're already dreaming up what it's going to feel like. And the outcome is just the outcome. It's going to come and it's going to go. But it's the journey to getting there. And I think that's where, as solopreneurs or people who are oftentimes doing it on our own, we're kind of like, I need to do something. I need to do what the other person is doing. I need to put together a website. I need to slap together a marketing plan. All those things are great, but if you don't have that clarity that really aligns with you, you're going to be living someone else's dream. It's just not going to work. So it's really
Mhm.
just being, having grace with yourself, and finding that time and the right people, the right cohort, the right mentor to really work with that has your best interest at heart as well.
Yeah, and I think there's something in the brain that when we have something that we're working towards, or even that Madonna ticket, that then we start to notice things. It's like when you decide you're going to buy a certain car, you then see that car all the time. Or if you're pregnant, you see all the pregnant people. Um, you just start to notice that thing. And I think that when you set a goal with a consultant and you're saying, here's my KPI, I want to add 5 or 10 more people to the practice, or I want to work less hours. Then when you see news articles that are about 5 time hacks that are going to help you get more done in less time or something like that, you're like, oh, maybe I should read that instead of just scroll past it, because you've set that as a KPI with your consultant. And so I think the magic of when people do say a vision board or they manifest things, it's not that it, in my opinion, it's not that it's some magical connection with the universe. Maybe it is. I don't want to totally rule that out, but there's also, when you set your mind on, I want to be able to afford a trip to Hawaii with my family within 2 years so that we can go on this $20,000 trip and ride through a helicopter by the volcanoes. And it's like you put that on some vision board or goal sheet or whatever. Then you're focusing in on those things that you've decided are going to give you joy or be a big stretch for you. And then you notice opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have noticed in the past. Do you see that with your clients, that once they have kind of those blinders on towards their goals, that it's just a lot easier to notice all the opportunities around them?
Joe, I was just having this conversation with my own mentor. I call her my Tinkerbell because every time I talk to her, she's like the yin to my yang. And she was sharing with me about this concept that I thought was brilliant. It's called driftwood. It's all driftwood until it's not. And, imagining that you're out in the water and you know that you're going towards this, land, you're going towards land. You don't see it yet, right? But as you're out on the water, all of a sudden you see driftwood. And this driftwood is a sign that land is near. Maybe you're not there yet. And it's all driftwood until it's not, until you finally come. And so once you make that, like you just said, that decision, you become decisive. It's like I just got off a consult call and the woman asked me, the therapist asked me, do you think it's the right time for me? It's like, well, you decide, like once you decide that it's going to be, even if it's not in this moment, that decision already propels this momentum, right? And we as people, we don't question the law of gravity, but we question the law of attraction all the time, which I think is really funny. But this is what we work with, is that when you make a decision and you align your desire with your belief, magic happens. And it's not because of any one person that you're working with, but because perhaps start to work with you or with me or someone that you connect with that has that faith for you that you don't have yet for yourself, that can guide you until you have it yourself to do, if that makes sense. And so I do say it's all driftwood until it's not. And once you make that decision, you start to see those signs everywhere. You start to take the opportunities. You say, normally I wouldn't go to a networking event, but hey, this thing in my inbox every week, you know what? Maybe I'll go this time. Or, if someone invites you somewhere, and normally you'd rather be alone on a Friday night, but why not? Yeah, go. Maybe you'll meet someone there. Maybe it won't be the exchange that you think it is, right? Like you think, oh, but I'm not gonna, get the next job. Let's say you're looking for a job, and I'm not gonna get the next job there, but you don't know if you're gonna meet someone who might know someone, right? I think it's about placing yourself in those positions from a place of like internal motivation and alignment. And that's where I think things start to come together. That's where all of the little pieces start to, kind of mold and bring you to this outcome. And the truth is, once the outcome happens, just like this, today speaking to you, I was so excited to have this conversation with you. And then in a few minutes, it'll be over, right? But it's the journey to getting here. And it's the journey of having this conversation with you that matters. Sometimes even more so than the outcome. And then the outcome is fantastic because you've been so inspired and invested in the journey that you've been creating towards it. So I do agree with you. I think that being decisive and following those magical touch points is what gets us to a place of just inspired action and sustainable outcomes.
Mm, so awesome. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I want them to know that they people work with them because of them. Oftentimes, once we start to level up or we reach the top of a mountain we've just climbed, um, we're at the bottom of another bigger mountain and we feel all of this angst and I don't know. And, we don't want to, we want to level up, but we're scared to, show ourselves more or do that thing because what if, this was successful, but I don't know if this is going to be. What I want them to know is that you know, people who do great things in the world um, experience things like imposter syndrome and the fear of showing up. And so if you're experiencing it, it's because you're doing something great. And just to see it as a sign of inspiration and excitement, and that you're up to something amazing in the world, and then to do it anyway. So feel the fear and do it anyway and show up.
Mm, I love that. If people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, where should we send them?
Sure, Instagram is great. It's at Dr. Victoria Grinman, or they can go to victoriagrinman.com. Send me a message and I'll always respond.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
So what are your next steps? When we talk to people like Victoria, it's so inspiring to think about stepping outside of our regular counseling practice. Now, does that mean that I'm saying that if you do just counseling, it's just counseling? No, not at all. We actually just in the last couple episodes, in episode 1008, we talked with Jessica Nichols, who talked about how she wants an ordinary solo practice and is not doing a ton beyond that, and why that really aligns with where she's at right now. So I'm not saying that you have to go shake up the world outside of counseling to feel this fulfillment. But I do want to challenge you to think, if you wanted to take some of this advice that Victoria gave us, to think through, if there weren't any boundaries, what would I actually want to do? A lot of times we're not doing that. So maybe it is starting to explore the idea of starting a podcast. Podcastlaunchschool.com. We have a ton of resources over there to help you learn about what it takes to be a therapist that's starting a podcast. That's needed in the world. We need professionals out in the world that are creating good quality content that's based on research and based on good, solid thinking. Maybe it's that you just start a TikTok, and if that hasn't been banned by the time that this goes live, who knows what that next step is. But think about what that next step could be for you to step into something bigger. And reach out to us if we can help. Reach out to people like Victoria if you resonate with what she said. Today's episode was sponsored by Gusto. Gusto is who we use for our payroll solutions. I absolutely love it because it helps do all the taxes and file everything, and I don't have to worry about having a whole accounting team or bookkeeping team that's doing that payroll. So try gusto.com/Joe. You're going to get 3 months totally free. It's going to help you with your payroll and so many other things, like doing open enrollment, filing payroll taxes, calculating paychecks, all that sort of stuff you can do with Gusto. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.